Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Eric Mertz.
And this is episode 67 of the podcast, and it's May 11th, 2022. As we record this, our main topic today is editing versus ghostwriting. So I'm really excited about this conversation. It's going to be awesome. Our podcast is sponsored by our patrons at patreon.com/Valerie Isan, IHSAN. Head over there and see all of the cool benefits, and you can start for as low as $1.
Just
How's
$1.
it going this morning?
Good. You?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good. It's early. We're doing an early morning show. We normally do the afternoon, so we may sound a little different.
I feel like I sound a little different.
Really? I know I feel a little different. What are you reading?
I just started reading a memoir called Red Paint by a Native woman from the Pacific Northwest who likes punk rock. That's about all I know. And her name is Sasha, and then a Native name that I cannot pronounce and has letters in it that I don't even recognize. So
it's interesting because my son and I just got a book that had words with letters I didn't recognize, and he kept asking me what it said, and so we had a long conversation about there's different alphabets out there, so it's kind of fun.
I just realized why it sounded funny, and that's because I had the wrong speakers going on. I wasn't hearing you I was hearing you from the from the whole computer. All right. What are you reading?
I just started reading a book called The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. It's a big, thick fantasy doorstop book, and comes highly the Lycanius trilogy. So I'm kind of looking forward to knocking out a summer trilogy.
Cool.
Something big in fantasy.
Big in fantasy?
Yeah, I can't, there's an urge sometimes just to grab one of those big books and like own it. And so I've been looking at this one for a while. And so, yeah, it might take me a couple of weeks to finish it. It's one of those books. I won't feel humble. I won't feel bad if next week I announce that I'm still reading it.
Still reading it. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I just finished a thriller by Carter Wilson. I heard him interviewed on, I think it was the Writers Inc. podcast. I can't remember now, actually. I listened to so many podcasts. I don't remember which one it was, but it was, I don't usually read thrillers, but this was a psychological thriller, which is more my jam.
Yeah.
In the thriller realm. I don't like grit, I've discovered. I just don't I don't like gritty stuff. So
how
I don't
would you define grit?
Like Walter Mosley.
Okay. Yeah.
Or, something that's like Dennis Lehane writes mystery thrillers, but they're, for me, usually depressing, like they're riveting, they're interesting, they're well written, but they usually end up with such an ambiguous ending that I'm like, I don't know. It just really is a downer for me.
I see that.
So yeah.
Mystic River's not an upper.
No. So yeah, when it comes to thrillers, or actually any novel really, for me, the less gritty the better. I mean, I like fast pace, I like riveting, I like, who doesn't, right?
Right.
But I've discovered that psychological thrillers or suspense novels are good, but they don't have like the drug deal gone wrong and the shooting and it doesn't have the gritty stuff, the crime dramas, the drug pen, kingpin.
Yeah,
I don't even know the words for that realm.
Right. Yeah, I think we could talk about this for a while too, but like everything else, this is a bigger topic. But I think that sometimes grit is an element in a story that's not added to a story that's not necessary. I think a lot of stories would be cleaner if the author just kind of got through that and just got to the character and all those side roads into like the crime that went wrong and the all that stuff could, to me, yeah. I guess I don't like grit either if it's not necessary. When I think of grit, though, it's funny you say that. I think of Charles Bukowski. You know, he's a surly man who drinks a lot and he's unrefined. Like that's the grit, character grit that I like. So
yeah. And then you also have the grit that's like the, I don't know, true grit, you know, the Western, you know, where you've got like the chutzpah,
right.
I like that kind of like character grit. Yes. But.
And for those who aren't watching, like Valerie just did a lot of motioning, you know, if you're just listening to this. So I feel the same way. I get fist pumpy about that stuff too. I'm also listening to, when you talk about podcasts, I'm listening to, do you listen to story podcasts, like narrative story podcasts?
I listened to Stephanie Bond's Coma Girl for a while, but no, I don't listen to fiction podcasts as a rule.
I just jumped back into The Old Gods of Appalachia, which is sort of a horror, like, you know, rural turn of the century horror thing. And it's riveting. Like, I actually listen to another, I had the choice between finish the last book I was reading or listen to another podcast of that. And I chose the podcast. So it's an interesting storytelling medium. I have to say it's compelling in a lot of ways.
Well, we should probably get into the topic today.
Let's do it.
So much to talk about. So editing versus ghostwriting. I know you are a professional ghostwriter, so I'm sure you'll have a lot to say about that.
Don't have a lot to say.
I
have nothing to say. I'm just kidding. I always have a lot to say.
And I'm a professional editor. So I think I would like to start by saying there's a lot of different kinds of editing.
Right.
And so if you're coming at it as a young writer, and young as in like this is your first book and you haven't had the experience of going through the editing process, it isn't just, you know, having a beta reader read your stuff and tell you what you should change and then you're done, or even hiring an editor and then changing some things and then being done. It's really not like that. There are several passes that you yourself as the author should go through. And, you know, we've talked about the story rubric before. So looking at all of the elements, and then if you know you have those areas of weakness, like for me, it's setting.
Right. So
after I write the book and I clean it up a little bit, I know I have to go back through and add setting to the whole thing. So that's an editing pass that I do personally. Right. And after it is as done as you can make it, then you can send it to a developmental editor or get a story analysis or a book doctor. There's a lot of different vocabulary. And I think that sometimes that's confusing too. And sometimes like line editing and copy editing in my mind are the same thing, but in others it's not. So developmental editing, book doctoring, those are kind of synonymous. Story analysis.
Wait, you said book doctoring?
Yeah.
You see that term?
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen that.
Oh, I see it all over the place.
I'm looking in the other corners of the internet than you are. So do people, now I'm going to ask you some questions. So I would look for a developmental editor if I was in that place. That's what I would search. But do people who do book doctoring, do they define do they define it differently than would say a developmental editor?
I think, and this is where it's unfortunate, there isn't like a standard necessarily. I mean, if you can go to the Editors Guild website, you'll probably get, you know, more standard verbiage. But when I think of book doctoring, I think of kind of a combination of developmental editor and story analysis. So when I do a story analysis, like when I did that with you, I read the whole book and I kind of like, I hate using the words grading and rating, but I just looked for areas.
It's an unfortunate necessary vocabulary, grading, rating. Yeah.
So I just sort of like looked for places where there could be improvement in a general macro sort of way, not general, but macro sort of way. So, you know, like the dialogue in the whole manuscript can be up or down, you know, could you do a little bit more of this? And you can increase the pacing if you know, do this. And we talked about emotional tone a couple of weeks ago. So those little elements. And so when I do a story analysis, I just look at all those elements and say, thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, tweak here, tweak there. but I don't give you necessarily specific places. Like on page 86, right. I think this paragraph should be moved to chapter 42, because, you know, that to me is more developmental editing, where they really like reconstruct your manuscript kind of for you. And that's less story analysis, although story analysis would necessarily be in there.
Right.
For the development. And so book doctoring, I think, is kind of a combination of the two. Like they still do the story analysis, but they might work with you a little bit more coaching wise, you know.
Right.
That's kind of the way I see it. But again, like another editor or another book doctor is going to have a different definition. So just doing your own personal research and talking to individual editors would probably be the best bet.
And you just brought up what I think is a great resource, and that's the Editors Guild. When people come through my site looking for, and they're confused about what that is and what they should pay and blah, 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 I end up sending them there, because I feel like that is, you get the market rate for what what that's supposed to cost. Because I've seen a lot of people in those, you know, advertising, developmental editing, who want to charge like unheard of rates. And so I think it's just good to orient people. And that's what I think all of our freelance industries need, right? Is something to like, this is what it should be. Like the other
this
things
range
are outliers. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. It's interesting. I didn't know that I would not have made that distinction between the two, doctoring and editing.
Yeah. And I just want to caveat, like, that's sort of my opinion as an editor.
Right. Yeah. I bet you if you did a Google search of story doctoring, you'd find novel doctoring, fiction doctoring, you'd find widely different job descriptions and rates and things. And that's part of the whole looking for a provider for your project, right? You're always, you know, there's a skill there that's like how to figure out what you need, who to go to, and what you should pay. Those can be really challenging steps. So
yeah, and I like looking for my own manuscripts. I like thinking about it in terms of having a team of freelancers that, you know, we all work together to create this really awesome product. So I'm going to do the legwork. I'm going to write the draft. I'm going to do a lot of self-editing, and then I'm going to hand it to someone that can analyze it. Right. You know, a fellow editor that can go through and give me the thumbs up, thumbs down, look at the stuff that I'm too close to see. And then I'm going to tweak it according to their comments. And then I'm going to send it to a line editor. And the line editor is the sentence structure editor. So they're going to look at grammar. They're going to look at, this word is a really usage. Awkward sentence. Can you say this simpler? You know, and then after you make all those changes, then you need a proofreader. Some authors are fine with using the same line editor and proofreader, the same person, to do both of those jobs at different times, you know, do the line editing, and then the author makes the changes, and then it's sent back to the same editor to do the proofreading. And the proofreading is just, I mean, that was a word that's associated with traditional publishing, when you get the actual physical proof, the galley copy, you know, and you're looking to see if like the formatting is right, and is there any weird looking things that hang on this page that shouldn't have, or, you know, whatever. So it's a proof copy reader.
Right.
And that's less important, you know, in the world of ebooks, and, you know, the formatting's going to change. And so it's more about catching the typos and, oh, this is the wrong there, here. Right.
Because
sort of
your spell check will notice that there and there, they're spelled correctly, but the usage is what matters. And you said something, it's not as important. Let's just say having a well-proofed copy, a properly proofed copy of your book is very important, because that is, you do not want reviews from readers that say, wow, looks sloppy, because they should be focusing on your story. I think what you're saying is it's less important, like the physical manuscript look is
format. Yes.
Yeah. Formatting is less important, because if you don't know, the ebook the e-reader really drives the formatting of the book. Like I have my e-reader set a certain way that does the pagination, that does the size. So you're really less, it's not like when you pick up a physical book today, like of old or even today, and you look at it and say small print or large print or those kind of things. It's the ebook does a lot of that for the readers.
And in terms of finding those typos, that's why some authors prefer to use a completely different person as the proofreader. So you have as many different eyeballs on your manuscript as possible before publication, because inevitably, you're just, you're not going to see it.
Yeah.
I remember one book, I went through 3 editors, I think it was 3 people saw it. And I went through the editing process multiple, like 8 times or something, different, layers of editing. And there's still in the published copy, there's still like 2 typos. Yeah. You can't see them all.
Yeah. And I see them I noticed one in the last book I was reading, the last professionally, look, everything we're doing, if you're hiring people, is professional, but, from a big publishing house, I was reading a traditionally published book, and I found a typo, and it was sort of validating in a way. It felt really good to see that word and the incorrect word, and to know that we all make mistakes, and it's just part of writing. You can't write 90,000 perfect words. And you're, in a reasonable amount of time. You probably could. You just be writing that book for forever, proving it.
So I was never interested professionally in ghostwriting myself.
Me either.
I have had a couple of clients after the fact. Looking back now, I think what I did was
ghostwriting.
I think so. There was one in particular where he had been writing like snippets and different versions over like 5 years. And he just sort of handed me the shoebox, you know what I mean? Yeah. And was like, okay, here's all my files, make it a book. And I was like, wow, this is a really
weird editing job.
Yeah. And I took it, I did it, but dang, I did not enjoy that. So that was further validation that I am not a ghostwriter and I don't want to write somebody else's book for them.
Yeah.
So how did you get into ghostwriting? What is ghostwriting? When does somebody need a ghostwriter? All of the things. 10 minutes, go.
Okay, that's a great question. Okay, first off, how did I get into ghostwriting? I won some screenwriting awards in 2006, 2007, in that time. Let's just say long ago, in a different me. And I was at the Willamette Writers Conference, and I was out there as a screenwriter. And if anybody remembers the Willamette Writers Conference that I'm talking about, there was a documentary being done about pitching, and I was pitching screenplays. And so there was a camera crew following me around everywhere I went, which was like not the way to do your first round of pitches as a writer.
I don't know about this. Is it actually out there? Can I watch this documentary?
I've been in contact with those producers like every 2 years just to find out. And they said, look, when one of the people from our documentary makes a hit, we'll put it out, because then that'll be the story. But
there's no story
yet. None of us
hit.
But the ghostwriting trail starts there, because one of the people at the conference found me in the bar and said, look, I run a ghostwriting company. I don't have any screenwriters. Would you like to be a ghostwriter for my company? And I said, sure. Not knowing what I was getting into, I just said, yes. I'm a yes person. I'll try anything once. And about 2 months later, I had a guy just sent me an email. I still have it, where he just sent me the pitch for a story. And I ended up writing it. And then I kept writing and writing and writing. And then it just became my business. And then 10 years ago, it became like my full-time gig, because for a lot of reasons, it became my full-time gig. When we talked about earlier, where there's no set prices or set standards, like the ghostwriting is even more of the Wild West than editing, because there are hundreds of providers out there. 90% of them are on your Upwork kind of sites, and they're not, you can't vet them as writers, because they don't have credits, they don't have experience, they don't have references. But the point is, like, ghostwriting is really just it's like a marathon. The longer you stay in it, the more of a resume you build, the longer you're, the more professional you become in that. So that's how it sort of like weeded out. And so now I'm at this place where I run, I would say like I'm in like the top, percentage of ghost writers, as far as just like volume and things like, so it's an interesting road, because a lot of what you described is, there's a lot of confusion with what comes to me, right? And that is, people will come, one of the biggest jobs I've ever gotten, the guy was looking for a proofreader. And so he came through my site, which has no keywords for proofreading. I'll just note that. Like, how he found me, I don't know, but we ended up writing a novel together. And so there's a lot of, I think a lot of people who are in that stage, there's two people who come to me. Let's just say this. There's the people who say, look, I have a book, I want to write it, I need someone else to do it. Let's start, right? That's the key. That's the main person. That's the person who knows they want a traditional ghostwriter. I have a story, I don't have time, I don't have the skill, but I have the money, so here we do this. The other client that I get is that middle client, and I think it's more germane to this conversation, and that is, I have a 30,000 word manuscript, it's in pieces, I've gotten some feedback, and I need a professional to help me like bring all of that together. And that is,
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second, because I think that is the most confusing part for authors.
Yes.
So a developmental editor is not going to make that 30,000 word manuscript a book for you.
Right.
But a ghostwriter will. So if you're in that place where you're just stuck and you don't know what to do next, you can get a writing coach. Right. You can talk to a developmental editor who might say, yeah, you could add, some of this and some of that and really flesh out this section. You might get that feedback, or you could go to a ghostwriter.
Right. And at least I would say, boy, nowadays, like once every 10 days, I send out an email that says, acknowledging that crossroads. You're at this place, you have your manuscript, you have two choices. You can go to a developmental editor. That means you're going to get some support, some feedback and tools to do this yourself. You're going to be you're ultimately driving the next draft. Or you're going to hire a ghostwriter. And when I do ghostwriting, so I sort of cheat the ghostwriting thing a little bit. I tell all of my clients that I'm not just going to do the dirty work of doing the writing. I do a little bit of both. So I'll take a client's, and I don't do this so much anymore, but this is not a big part of my business. But when I do it, I'll say, look, I'm going to take the book, I'm going to involve you in each of my writing stages. So I'm going to diagnose it, like here's what I would do, and I'm going to talk to you about that. I'm trying to educate that client on, hopefully this is book one of many. This is not just a one-shot deal in your writing life. And I'm going to hopefully, you're not going to need me the next time. I want to show that client that it's not easy, but if you're following some good advice, there's a path to get there. So I try to do a little bit more of.
And that's for the people that come to you with that 30,000 word manuscript and don't know what to do with it. Okay.
Right. I try to make that educational. I will do the writing, but I ultimately want to work myself out of a job. That's been sort of my business model all along. Like I want to give people the best quality product, but I want to give them as much information as I can, so that the next time they do this, they're capable of doing it themselves.
So would you say you're co-writing at that stage then? Like ghost co-writing? Is that a thing?
It is. Yeah, I would say, right? Okay. I would say so. I think that's probably, in fact, I may, in that next time I write that email, like use that term, because it sounds a little more gentler. And I think a lot of ghostwriters don't want to do this because these are paying clients, right? They just, so they want, they don't want to like lose out on business, but I feel like it's best to enable someone to write better, empower someone to write better, than it is to enable them to hire me a second time. So yeah, people, I think there's two places where I would say, like, I would be, if you're a series writer, if you're one of these people who's putting out a lot of books, and because I think this is what the Stephen Kings of the world are doing, right? There's no way with the amount that like King and Kuntz and some of these other big authors in the traditional world and the bigger authors in the indie world, you can't go through all these stages that you're talking about. You can't, because it takes months. You know, you would be doing too much of the work. So I think a lot of the bigger professionals out there have a ghostwriter. They write that first draft, and then they get that ghostwriter in to implement the changes that knows the voice, that knows the story. So I think that's a time when you want a ghostwriter. If you're going to be high volume and you want like what you talked about, like a publishing partner, someone who's going to be with you along for that ride, you may want a ghostwriter who's going to come in and like, all right, you're going to come in and you're going to implement those developmental edits that I get from my developmental editors. And that's what you do. The other time that I think a ghostwriter comes in, and this is actually more like what I like to do, and that is I have an idea for a story. I want it to be like this. I can't like that sort of like, I'm going to ghostwrite the storyline with you, right? I'll take that genesis of an idea. I'll help you break it down. These are the cool characters. Here's how to make that a 1-book, 3-book, help that person create the ultimate story map. Mm-hmm. That's probably also, again, for those people who are looking big, longer term, might be where you want a ghostwriter, someone who's maybe read a little more, written a little bit more, and understands how to sustain a narrative for the length of time that you are envisioning.
Yeah, I think that more professionals than ghostwriters can do that part, where you're creating, helping to create a world or whatever.
Yeah. Well, one of my early clients was a romance writer, and she was putting out a book every month. And she had like 4 people, she had someone developing a storyline for her, feeding it to her so she could write it. Then she had a ghostwriter implementing the changes, and then all the other people down the line, the other editors. And so the book would be coming, everybody would be working like a book. You'd be working on developing book 1 while she's writing book, mm-hmm. Or wait, in reverse, right? So she's always got 4 books moving, and so they're just always coming out. That you need a pro. You need someone to help you with that. But yeah.
So you wrote a book about when to hire a ghostwriter. Yeah.
Yes.
Why don't we put that in the show notes for today?
You should.
So folks can check that out. And is that, where can they find that?
They can find that on my website,
okay.
www.ericmertzwriting.com. It's all over the site. It's on almost every page. I'll give you a link to the book funnel, book page for it. But really, like, the book is How to Hire a Ghostwriter. You read it, you edited it. Mm-hmm. So if you like the writing, that's me. And if you like the polish, that's Val. She brings that to everything. I wrote that book, and I don't want to sound like I'm talking poorly of my fellow ghostwriters, but I feel like there's a lot of ghostwriters. They either charge an arm and a leg, and without giving the client, the information, or they're not polished, or they're not. This is a book that's going to say, here's how you interview a ghostwriter. Here's the questions you should ask me. Here's the questions you should ask anybody. It covers everything from cost to process to, ownership, all that stuff you need to know.
Excellent. Well, thanks for talking with me today about editing and ghostwriting.
So much fun.
It is. Have a great day. Have a great week writing, y'all. And we'll see you next time.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.